It's election day in Israel, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is fighting to stay in office. Minutes after the polls opened, he and his main opponent, Isaac Herzog, cast their votes.
The race is very close, but does Netanyahu have what it takes to win? So joining us now from D.C. is Aaron David Miller, a vice president at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Miller.
Appreciate it.
So let me ask you right off the bat, do you think that Prime Minister Netanyahu can survive this latest political battle? He's a survivor, we know that.
I mean, you have 20% of the Israeli electorate undecided, even as they vote today. And it's virtually impossible, to predict the outcome of this election. There are three things to watch for. Number one, what will the seat differential be between Netanyahu and his chief rival, Isaac Herzog? If it's more than 4 seats, chances are that Herzog will be able, at least be in a position to put together the next government. Number two, what happens to Moshe Kahlon's Kulanu party? He's a right of center independent that basically is the party to watch. He is the kingmaker. If he chooses to go with Netanyahu and they were both formerly the same party, then Netanyahu likely will put together the next government. And finally, will the smaller parties on the left and right disappear? There are several parties who are actually fighting for their political existence. One on the right, one on the left. If the one on the left disappears, Meretz, then that will be a blow to Herzog. If the one on the right disappears, Lieberman's Israel Beitenu party, then that will be a blow to Netanyahu. So polls close at 10 p.m. Israeli time, 4 p.m. our time. You'll have really good indications whether or not we're talking about a close 2-month effort for the next prime minister to put together the government, or whether or not the polls were wrong and one side or the other is going to be a clear winner.
So much was made of Netanyahu's speech to the U.S. Congress. From where you're sitting, how does that speech resonate with voters in Israel? Could it have given him an extra edge, or did it backfire?
All the polls suggest that those parties who stress social and economic issues, it's counterintuitive, even though security is critically important, Iran, the Palestinian issue, Hamas, those are not the issues, frankly, that appear to be resonating with voters. Far more important than Netanyahu's speech in terms of an unintended consequence was his decision in December of last year to go to new elections. If, in fact, he loses, it will be viewed as a serious political blunder. He fired 2 of his ministers, one of which is part of the coalition that could end up governing Israel, Tzipi Livni. The other, the Minister of Finance, Yair Lapid, may emerge with 10, 11, 12 seats in the election. That's the critically important point of departure, it seems to me, and that may prove to be a very costly one, not the speech in Congress.
Aaron, back in February, you wrote a really great piece for Politico when you described the relationship between Israel and the United States as too big to fail. And one of the points that you made, which I thought was really fascinating, was the ongoing turmoil that exists, for example, in Iraq and Syria was actually good for the U.S. You had 6 points. I just thought it was a great piece. What did you mean overall by that?
Well, I mean, actually, the phrase I used was that unlike Lehman Brothers, the U.S.-Israeli relationship is too big to fail. Mm-hmm. I mean, my point was this, that in a Middle East that is melting down at a rate that, having worked for half a dozen secretaries of state and looked at this issue over the last 40 years, that even stuns me. The more the meltdown, the more the behavior of key Arab actors in the region, Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, Assad, the more outrageous the behavior, the more violent, frankly, the more enduring and in stark relief is the U.S.-Israeli relationship. And despite the imperfections in Israeli policies and challenges of an occupation of the West Bank, unresolved problems with the Palestinians, the reality is that as long as, for most Americans, and the Gallup polls continue to demonstrate this, Israel remains in the minds of most Americans a pluralistic democratic society, by and large aligned with American interests and values, the relationship is going to endure, and the best set of talking points to support that, and I'm only reporting here, I'm not trying to editorialize, is a region in crisis and in chaos. We need friends, and our efforts to cement relations with the Saudis, now we're moving back to a position where we're probably going to resume military assistance to the Egyptians. We need friends, however imperfect they may be. And clearly, the Egyptians and Saudis don't even pretend to share our values. The Israelis actually do. And that's a pretty good case for the continuation of this special relationship.
All right, Aaron David Miller from the Wilson Center. Thank you so much, sir.
Always a pleasure.